Usually when you are making a decision about bringing a new piece of software into your business, there is this comforting expectation of predictability.
Right, yeah. You want to know what you're buying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Think about buying a company car for your sales team. You look at the specs, you review the safety ratings, you hand over the money, and you get the keys. From that moment on, you basically know exactly what that car is capable of doing. It's a bounded entity.
Yeah, I mean, it has a steering wheel, a fixed top speed, a predefined mechanical limit. The driver operates it, sure, but the machine itself doesn't just wake up one morning and decide to, modify its own fuel injection system to optimize for a different route.
Right.
It is fundamentally a known quantity on your operational balance sheet.
And that predictability, that's basically the bedrock of traditional IT procurement. But then, you step into the world of autonomous AI agents, and specifically the open source side of this frontier.
Which changes everything.
Completely. Suddenly, that predictable company car is assembling its own engine parts while driving down the highway at 200 miles an hour.
Yeah, and if you look really closely, you aren't entirely sure who installed the brakes. Or honestly, if there are brakes at all.
Exactly. We're looking at a technological landscape right now that is moving faster than anything we have ever seen. And I mean, it's thrilling for the developers, but for the people actually running companies, it's a bit terrifying.
Because it completely breaks those traditional risk assessment models. I mean, the gap between the organizations that figure out how to harness this safely and the ones that either ignore it or deploy it recklessly, that gap is going to become unbridgeable over the next 36 months.
It's huge.
We are moving from software as a tool to, software as a labor force. And that leaves a lot of traditional security models completely in the dust.
So, welcome to this deep dive. If you are joining us today, you are exactly who this conversation is designed for. You're smart, you're busy, you are likely making or influencing the technology adoption decisions for your business, and frankly, you are understandably skeptical of the relentless, breathless AI hype out there.
Which is a very healthy skepticism to have, by the way.
Absolutely. So our mission today is to cut straight through that noise. We are unpacking part 2 of the incredibly insightful Agents at Work series put together by the research team at PrentusAI.
They do fantastic work over there.
They really do. If you aren't familiar with them, PrentusAI operates as an independent learning hub. Their entire mandate is taking these wildly complex, often opaque AI agent technologies and translating them into plain English for business owners. People who need to make actual decisions, not just read tech blogs.
And their approach is so vital because they focus on the operational reality, not just the theoretical capabilities. They actually look at the deployment friction, the hidden costs, the security vulnerabilities that, the marketing brochures conveniently leave out.
Right, the stuff that actually matters on a Tuesday morning when things break. So to ground you in where we are in this journey, this is a 3-part exploration. In part 1, we look at Anthropic's Claude managed agents. We describe that environment as the walled garden. It's a highly managed, enclosed, pristine ecosystem for AI agents.
Very safe, very controlled.
Exactly. You pay Anthropic a premium, and in exchange, they take care of all the messy infrastructure. They patch the servers, they secure the perimeter, they make sure the agents play nicely within predefined boundaries.
But of course, there's always a trade-off.
Right. So if Anthropic is the pristine walled garden, today we are strapping in and exploring the explosive wild frontier of the open source alternative.
The Wild West?
Yes.
Yes.
We're going to cover mind-bending growth numbers that are literally rewriting the software record books. A very real security crisis that has IT teams in an absolute panic. And the massive corporate giants stepping in to play sheriff in this newly formed Wild West.
And the lens for all of this, for anyone listening, has to be business strategy. Choosing how to deploy AI agents is no longer just a localized technical decision made in the basement by the engineering team.
No, not at all.
The path you choose dictates your operational resilience, your total data sovereignty, and ultimately your bottom line.
Okay, so let's start with the phenomenon that is completely rewiring the developer ecosystem right now. OpenClaw. Let's define what this actually is, minus all the technical jargon.
Good idea.
OpenClaw is an open-source autonomous AI agent runtime. In plain English, it is free software that you download and run on your own company's servers. Its job is to take an AI model, which is normally just a chatbot, and turn it into an independent worker.
Right.
You do this by giving it hands and feet to interact with your company's actual systems.
And that analogy of hands and feet gets right to the core of the utility here. An AI model by itself, like let's say the foundational model of GPT-4, is basically a brain in a jar.
Okay, a brain in a jar.
Yeah, you can type a question to the jar, and the jar types an answer back. It is incredibly smart, but it is completely isolated.
Right, it can't actually do anything.
Exactly. A runtime environment like OpenClaw acts as the central nervous system, connecting that brain to the outside world. It hooks directly into your WhatsApp business accounts, your Telegram channels, your internal Slack workspaces, Discord servers, Microsoft Teams.
So it allows the brain to reach out and actually pull levers.
Yes.
And the crucial differentiator here is that it is entirely model agnostic.
Which is huge.
Yeah, you aren't locked into whichever company built the brain. If you download OpenClaw, you can plug in Anthropic's Claude today. Tomorrow, if OpenAI releases a better GPT model, you just swap the API key.
It's that simple.
Or you could use Google's Gemini. You can even run an open source local model like a Llama that lives entirely on your own laptop. You are providing a standardized modular body for any of these digital brains to walk around in.
Which represents a massive shift in leverage, right? The power moves from the AI providers back to the businesses deploying the tools.
For sure. And the history of this specific project is fascinating, especially considering how fast it has moved. It originally launched in November 2025, and it wasn't called OpenClaw at the time. The developers launched it under the name ClawBot.
Yeah, a naming convention that seemed practically designed to invite legal scrutiny from Anthropic.
Oh, yeah.
Given their flagship model is named Claude.
Oh, the cease and desist was probably drafted before the sun even went down.
Without a doubt.
Anthrop hit them with a trademark complaint immediately because ClawBot operating in the AI agent space was way too close for comfort. So the open source developers pivoted and renamed it to Moltbot.
Moltbot.
Yeah, and that name survived for all of 3 days before the community rebelled against it, and they finally settled on OpenClaw.
Much better name.
Definitely. And it was the moment they hit that final branding that the adoption curve simply went vertical. The numbers we are looking at from the PrentusAI research are staggering, even for the tech industry.
They really are.
Let's talk about GitHub stars for a second. If you aren't spending your days writing code, a GitHub star is basically a like or a bookmark from a software engineer.
Right. It's a metric of respect.
Exactly. It's the ultimate metric for how much buzz, respect, and mind share an open source project commands.
It acts as the leading indicator of where the entire industry is heading. Developers start projects they intend to build their companies around.
So to put this in perspective, let's look at React. React is the JavaScript framework built by Meta. It basically powers the modern visual internet as we know it.
It's foundational.
Right. It took React 10 full years to accumulate 230,000 GitHub stars. 10 years of grinding, corporate backing, and community building.
Okay.
OpenClaw had 346,000 stars in under 5 months.
Wow.
I know. It obliterated a decade-long milestone set by the world's most popular framework in roughly 60 days.
And the velocity of that adoption curve is what demands attention here. When you see adoption happen at that unprecedented speed, it indicates something far deeper than mere developer hype.
Yeah, it's not just a fad.
No, engineers are notoriously pragmatic. They don't drop their existing tools for a shiny new toy unless the shiny new toy is solving a problem that is intensely painful and doing it so effectively that the switching cost becomes totally irrelevant.
Yeah, and we aren't just talking about developers poking around in sandboxes either. The active usage statistics are what elevate this from a coding phenomenon to a boardroom conversation.
Absolutely.
As of April 2026, OpenClaw is seeing 38 million monthly visitors to its ecosystem. They have 3.2 million active engaged users. And most importantly, there are over 500,000 running instances worldwide.
Which is a massive footprint.
Yeah, that means 500,000 distinct servers are actively running this software, processing tasks, and acting as digital workers right now.
To really understand the global infrastructure shift, you have to look geographically at where those 500,000 instances are spinning up.
Okay, where are they?
Well, the PrentusAI data highlights an explosive adoption rate in Asia, specifically pointing to China as the fastest growing region with a 1,436% month-over-month growth rate.
Wait, 1,400%?
Yes, month over month. We are seeing massive corporate players like Tencent and Baidu integrating OpenClaw natively into their cloud offerings. Thundersoft is achieving full-stack deployment across their industrial automation platforms.
Wow.
So this has matured way past the phase of being a weekend project for tech enthusiasts. It's literally being laid down as the concrete foundation of global enterprise architecture.
Okay, wait, I need to pause on these usage numbers and apply a little skepticism here.
Sure.
The research states the average user session on OpenClaw is 45 minutes.
Right.
That is nearly double the average session length on ChatGPT.
Mm.
The user retention rate is sitting at 92%, which is a number usually reserved for things like oxygen and drinking water.
It's unheard of.
So if OpenClaw is a localized piece of software running on private servers, not a centralized website like ChatGPT, how are the developers even getting this telemetry data to know someone is spending exactly 45 minutes on it? Isn't that a massive privacy red flag for an enterprise tool?
That is the exact right thread to pull. The distinction here lies in the enterprise management layer. While the core OpenClaw runtime sits on your private servers, the project offers a centralized opt-in cloud dashboard for enterprise fleet management.
Okay, so it's optional.
Yes. Companies connect their local instances to this dashboard to monitor the health, resource usage, and active tasks of their agent fleets across multiple departments. The aggregated, anonymized telemetry from that management layer is what provides these metrics.
I see.
It is opt-in, but the management utility is so high that the vast majority of enterprise deployments use it.
Even with that explained, though, the 45-minute metric still baffles me. What is a human user actually doing for 3/4 of an hour in a single session? You type a prompt into ChatGPT, you get an answer, you leave. It takes 2 minutes.
Right.
How is this environment keeping people actively engaged for nearly an hour? And why are 92% of them coming back the next day?
Well, the shift in session time represents the transition from a conversational interface to a collaborative workspace.
What do you mean?
Users aren't just asking questions anymore, they are co-working. And the feature sets driving this retention are really fascinating. Look at the release of version 2026.4.9, which introduced a core capability called dreaming.
Okay, I have to admit, even just hearing the phrase "an AI agent dreaming" triggers every sci-fi warning bell in my head. It sounds inherently unnerving.
The terminology is definitely provocative, but the underlying mechanism is remarkably practical, and it directly mirrors human cognitive architecture.
How so?
Well, think about the biological purpose of human sleep. During your waking hours, you absorb an incredible amount of fragmented, scattered information. It is only when you sleep that your brain engages in memory consolidation. It replays the day's events. It forms novel connections between seemingly unrelated facts, and it moves short-term experiences into structured long-term memory.
Okay.
The OpenClaw dreaming feature replicates this exact process for your digital workforce.
Walk me through a concrete example of how that works in an office setting.
Okay, let's say you have an OpenClaw agent dedicated to your human resources department.
Right.
During the day, the HR director uploads a series of fragmented notes about employee performance, drops in a spreadsheet about departmental budget constraints, and asks the agent to draft 3 different job descriptions.
Pretty standard stuff.
Exactly. The agent does the tasks. Under normal circumstances, with a regular chatbot, that is the end of the transaction.
Just forgets it all.
Right. But with the dreaming feature enabled, when the HR director logs off and the agent enters an idle state, it doesn't just power down, it begins replaying the user notes.
Without being prompted.
Without being prompted. It reviews the historical conversation data from the past week. It synthesizes the budget constraints with the performance reviews and the new job descriptions, forming active structured memories without any human prompting.
Wait, so while the HR director is asleep at their house, their AI agent is sitting on a server, quietly reviewing the day's documents, connecting dots that nobody explicitly asked to connect, and essentially developing a subconscious understanding of the company's internal dynamics.
That is the mechanical reality of it. Yes, it synthesizes context organically, and this capability compounds with the subsequent updates.
Like what?
Well, version 4.9 introduced active memory plugins. Because the agent spent the night dreaming and consolidating that data, the next morning, the HR director can log in and simply say, based on yesterday's performance reviews, how do these new job descriptions impact our budget?
And it just knows.
It just knows.
Oh.
The agent doesn't need the files re-uploaded. It doesn't need a summary of the previous conversation. It recalls that synthesized context instantly.
That's why.
That same 4.1 SEER version also added native codecs integration, which vastly improved the agent's ability to write and debug code autonomously alongside macOS local voice support, meaning you can verbally converse with the agent through your computer's native audio interface.
Bringing voice into it makes that co-working dynamic even more tangible. But from a user acquisition standpoint, the masterstroke has to be version 4.11.
Oh, absolutely.
They added a ChatGPT history import function. You can literally export your entire multi-year conversation history from OpenAI, press a button in OpenClaw, and inject all of that historical context straight into your newly spun-up agent.
Yep.
You don't suffer the friction of starting over with a blank slate. The agent essentially inherits the entire working relationship you had with ChatGPT.
And that means the friction of adoption drops to zero. That single feature perfectly explains the 92% retention rate.
It makes total sense now.
The more data the agent processes and the more it dreams on your specific corporate history, the more tailored and indispensable it becomes to your workflow. You are spending those 45-minute sessions doing highly leveraged, deeply contextual strategic work rather than wasting time feeding the system basic background prompts.
The capabilities are undeniably powerful. But it begs a fundamental architectural question for a business owner.
Which is?
If Anthropic has this beautiful, clean, Claude-managed agents environment where they manage the servers, handle the complex updates, and take on the burden of the infrastructure, why would a company choose the friction of OpenClaw?
Yeah.
Why take on the immense hassle of downloading software, provisioning your own servers, configuring the network, and running the whole operation yourself?
It boils down to the oldest philosophical debate in enterprise infrastructure, the decision between renting and owning.
Renting versus owning.
Yeah, and the PrentusAI team laid out a real estate analogy for this that cuts right to the heart of the strategic dilemma.
Let's explore that analogy deeply because it maps perfectly to the financial realities. Deploying Claude-managed agents is like renting a premium office suite in a high-end commercial skyscraper.
Exactly.
The landlord, in this case, Anthropic, handles everything outside of your specific desk. They fix the HVAC when it breaks, they pay for the security desk downstairs, and they hire the overnight cleaning crew. For a business, the friction is almost non-existent.
Right. You just show up.
You just sign the lease, show up, open your laptop, and start working. But the trade-off is that you are entirely subjugated to their rules. The landlord dictates the operating hours. If they decide the building closes at 8 p.m., you stop working at 8 p.m.
Yep.
If you want to knock down a wall to build a custom broadcast studio, you can't because you don't own the structure.
And conversely, deploying OpenClaw is the equivalent of buying an empty plot of land and constructing the building yourself.
Right.
You hold the deed. If you want to knock down a wall, you grab a sledgehammer and do it. You build your own custom security protocols, you dictate the layout, and you have absolute uncompromising control over the environment.
The terrifying downside being that if the plumbing ruptures at 2 in the morning and floods the server room, there is no landlord to call.
No, there isn't.
You are the one holding the wrench in the dark. You assume total responsibility for the maintenance and the integrity of the infrastructure.
But taking on that maintenance burden sounds really unappealing until you look at the alternative threat, which is vendor lock-in.
Ah, vendor lock-in.
The PrentusAI research highlights a critical vulnerability in the modern enterprise. 42% of active AI projects report being significantly affected by vendor lock-in risks.
Almost half.
Yes. In the context of enterprise technology, owning the building provides the only viable safeguard against that paralysis.
Let's walk through a scenario of what vendor lock-in actually feels like for a mid-sized company. Say I run a logistics firm, and I run the office with Claude-managed agents. I spend a year building my entire automated dispatch system, my customer service workflows, and my predictive inventory pipelines around Claude.
Okay, so in that scenario, your entire operational nervous system is Claude-dependent. You are reliant on one AI provider, one specific set of language models, and one proprietary API structure.
Right.
Now imagine Anthropic alters their strategic direction. Perhaps they double their API pricing to satisfy investor demands.
Ouch.
Or, more insidiously, they update their terms of service. And their new ethical guidelines categorize your specific type of logistics tracking as a violation of their acceptable use policy.
Right.
What is your recourse?
Well, I would have to pack up the office. But I can't just pick up my code and leave because all my code is written specifically to talk to Anthropic systems.
Exactly.
I would have to spend months and hundreds of thousands of dollars completely rewriting the foundational architecture of my business just to switch to a new provider.
You are effectively held hostage by your infrastructure. But with OpenClaw, because the runtime layer is completely decoupled from the AI model layer, you avoid the trap. You own the application logic.
Right, because I own the building.
Right. If you are using OpenAI's GPT-4 to power your dispatch agent today, and tomorrow Google releases a Gemini model that processes tasks twice as fast for half the cost, the migration is trivial.
Just a swap.
You open the OpenClaw settings panel, change the API endpoint from OpenAI to Google, and the new brain immediately slots into the existing body. You don't rewrite a single line of application code. You maintain complete agility in a market where the underlying models are becoming commoditized.
Agility is a strong argument. But let's talk about the raw mathematics keeping a business running. Control is great in theory, but does owning the building actually translate to better daily operations?
The answer lies in the uptime mathematics, which is the ultimate make-or-break metric for any mission-critical workflow.
How so?
When you rely on a single provider setup like Claude-managed agents, your operational status is entirely at the mercy of their server health. Historically, looking at the data for single-provider cloud setups, the industry standard achievement is roughly 99.5% availability.
Which, to anyone outside of network engineering, sounds fantastic.
It does.
If my kid brings home a 99.5% on a math test, we are putting it on the fridge. Why? Is a 99.5% considered a failing grade in enterprise architecture?
Because of what that 0.5% represents in absolute time, 99.5% availability translates to your systems being completely offline for nearly 44 hours a year.
24 hours. Almost 2 entire days of total operational blackout.
Think about your logistics company scenario. If your AI agents are offline for 44 hours, your automated trucks aren't being dispatched, your customer service lines are dead, your inventory isn't being ordered.
It's a disaster.
Right. A 44-hour blackout spread unpredictably across the year isn't an inconvenience. For a modern digital business, it is a catastrophic loss of revenue and customer trust.
But how does OpenClaw fix that? If I'm running OpenClaw locally, but still using the OpenAI API, and OpenAI goes down, I'm still offline, aren't I?
Not if you utilize the multi-provider redundancy that OpenClaw enables. Because it is model agnostic, you can configure fallback protocols.
Oh, I see.
Your primary agent runs on GPT-4. The system detects that the OpenAI servers have crashed. Within milliseconds, OpenClaw automatically routes the task to Anthropic's Claude instead.
Seamlessly.
If Anthropic is struggling with latency, it falls back to a locally hosted open source model. Because you are pooling the availability of multiple providers, your system resilience skyrockets. You move from 99.5% availability to 99.99% availability.
Let's do the translation on that. What does 99.99% look like on the calendar?
99.99% translates to just 13 minutes of downtime per year.
13 minutes versus 44 hours.
Yeah.
When you frame it like that, owning the building isn't just about philosophical control, it is a mathematical imperative for survival. The case for OpenClaw seems airtight. You get absolute data sovereignty, zero vendor lock-in, the dreaming features compounding your organizational intelligence, and you shrink your downtime from days to minutes. It sounds like the ultimate strategic victory.
It is a victory, provided you have the capability to defend the territory you just claimed. And this is where the narrative takes a very dark turn.
Right.
Because while owning the building gives you the keys, it also gives you the responsibility for the locks. And the data unequivocally shows that the vast majority of businesses deploying OpenClaw have left the front doors completely ripped off the hinges.
Yeah, we have to pivot to the genuinely uncomfortable security reality of this explosive growth. The situation highlighted in the PrentusAI report isn't a theoretical risk, it is an active bleeding crisis.
It really is.
Let's look at the scope. In early 2026, a prominent security researcher named Mayor Diane conducted a sweeping scan of the open internet, specifically looking for default OpenClaw ports. He discovered 42,665 OpenClaw instances exposed directly to the open web.
And to understand the gravity of that number, we need to clarify what exposed directly to the open internet actually means.
Please do.
It means these servers were spun up without a protective firewall. They were not placed behind a corporate VPN.
Just sitting out there.
Just sitting there. Anyone sitting in a coffee shop anywhere in the world with a standard web browser who simply typed in the correct IP address would be instantly greeted by the control panel of that company's AI agent.
And arriving at the front door is bad enough. But the locks themselves were fundamentally broken. Of the instances that Diane actively verified, an astonishing 93.4% suffered from authentication bypass.
Authentication bypass is the nightmare scenario for a security professional.
Explain that.
It means the login screen exists, but it is functionally decorative. A malicious actor doesn't need to guess passwords. They don't need to steal an employee's credentials. And they don't need to intercept a two-factor authentication code.
They just walk right in.
Exactly. Due to a flaw in the way the sessions were handled, literally anyone on the internet could manipulate the browser request, click straight past the login screen, and gain full administrative access.
That is terrifying.
And remember what these agents are connected to. These are not isolated sandboxes. These agents hold the API keys to corporate Slack channels, WhatsApp business accounts, local file systems, and internal databases.
They have direct authenticated access to the actual nervous system of the business. Yeah. And there was a specific terrifying vulnerability driving a lot of the panic around this exposure, tracked as CVE 2026-25253.
Right.
I know rattling off CVE numbers sounds like dry compliance talk, but the mechanics of this specific flaw are staggering.
Yeah.
The National Vulnerability Database gave it a CVSS severity score of 8.8 out of 10.
And the Common Vulnerability Scoring System is the industry benchmark for panic. Anything above an 8.0 requires immediate drop-everything remediation.
Yeah.
This specific flaw was categorized as a remote code execution, or RCE, vulnerability.
Explain the mechanics of an RCE for someone who isn't a penetration tester. What does that 8.8 actually allow a hacker to do?
Okay, in a standard attack, a hacker might trick the AI agent into revealing a sensitive document. That is bad, but it is limited to what the agent has permission to see.
Okay.
A remote code execution vulnerability operates on a much deeper level. It means the attacker bypasses the AI agent entirely and sends malicious commands directly to the underlying server hardware hosting the agent.
Whoa.
Yeah, the server is tricked into running the attacker's custom code as if it were a legitimate system instruction. The attacker can install a backdoor, deploy ransomware across the network, or commandeer the server to launch attacks on other companies. They take total physical control of the machine.
And the open source developers issued a patch for this on January 30th.
They did.
But here is the fatal flaw in the owning the building analogy. The landlord isn't there to apply the patch. If your internal IT team doesn't manually download the update, take the server offline, install the patch, and reboot the system, you remain entirely vulnerable.
Right.
And the research shows that months after the patch was released, thousands of these production instances remain sitting ducks, completely unpatched.
And waiting for an attacker to find your exposed IP address is only half the problem. The ClawHub data suggests that businesses are actively inviting the attackers inside the perimeter.
Yeah, this brings us to the community marketplace and a concept that I think is the most insidious part of this entire deep dive. Let's talk about ClawHub.
Okay.
It functions as the app store for OpenClaw. It boasts over 44,000 community-created skills that you can download to give your agent new abilities. If you need your agent to connect to Salesforce, there's a free skill for that.
Yep.
If you needed to scrape data from a competitor's website, there's a skill for that. But security researchers discovered 341 explicitly malicious skills sitting cleanly on the marketplace, being downloaded by unsuspecting companies.
It's incredible.
And 335 of them were traced back to a single, highly coordinated attack operation dubbed ClawHavoc.
The ClawHavoc operation is a textbook example of a supply chain attack. Every modern business owner needs to understand this mechanism because it circumvents traditional defenses completely. When software engineering teams build tools today, they do not write every single line of code from scratch. It is too slow. Instead, they pull in pre-built functional blocks from open source repositories in this scenario, skills from ClawHub.
Right.
A supply chain attack occurs when a bad actor decides that trying to hack directly into a well-defended company is too difficult. Instead, they poison the well that the company drinks from.
It's like a saboteur realizing they can't break into the bank vault, so they get a job at the concrete factory and poison the cement being used to build the bank's foundation.
That's a perfect analogy.
The bank constructs the entire fortress, completely oblivious to the fact that the structural materials themselves are rigged to collapse.
The physical parallel is exact. The attacker creates a highly useful, completely free tool, perhaps a skill that perfectly formats raw data into beautiful PDF reports.
Something everyone needs.
Exactly. They upload it to ClawHub. Hundreds of enterprise IT teams download it because it solves a real problem and saves them a week of development time. It functions flawlessly.
What?
But buried deep within the thousands of lines of code is a malicious payload that quietly exfiltrates the contents of those reports back to a server controlled by the attacker. The business deployed the malware themselves.
And the scale of this poisoned well is genuinely hard to fathom. A comprehensive security audit conducted by SNCC, a major developer security platform, found that 36% of all skills on ClawHub contain detectable prompt injection vulnerabilities.
Let the weight of that statistic settle for a moment. More than 1/3 of the community-created tools that businesses are downloading to enhance their operations have security vulnerabilities actively baked into their architecture.
It's mind-blowing.
As of April 2026, the OpenClaw project has over 138 officially tracked CVEs. The security degradation became so pronounced that Microsoft, who is heavily invested in the secure deployment of enterprise AI, had to step in and publish a dedicated step-by-step security blog simply to teach the community how to run OpenClaw without immediately compromising their networks.
And then the absolute hammer dropped. Kaspersky, which operates as one of the largest and most entrenched cybersecurity firms on the planet, released a bulletin officially declaring OpenClaw unsafe for use in its default configuration.
A massive blow.
I want you to really internalize the whiplash here. The fastest-growing open-source software project in human history, a tool that reached milestones twice as fast as React, with 3.2 million active users and 500,000 running instances, has just been declared structurally unsafe by a major global security vendor.
This creates an intense cognitive dissonance, and we need to provide some very deliberate context here to avoid unwarranted panic.
Good point.
Kaspersky declaring the software unsafe in its default state does not mean that OpenClaw is fundamentally broken or that the core development team is incompetent.
I need you to clarify that, because if a security firm says it is unsafe, the natural assumption is that the code is garbage. How can it be brilliant, but also unsafe?
The distinction lies in the philosophy of defaults and the maturity of the user base. OpenClaw's default configuration is designed around a philosophy of allow everything.
Why would they do that?
Because that posture eliminates friction. It allows a junior developer to download the software, spin it up, and watch the agent perform magic within 3 minutes. The initial user experience is flawless.
So it's about growth.
Exactly. However, an allow everything default is an unmitigated disaster in a production business environment. If we look back at the history of foundational enterprise technology, this exact same pattern repeats itself endlessly.
Really? Like what?
Think back to the early days of Docker containers, or the initial rollouts of Kubernetes orchestration, or even the early distributions of Linux. When deployed carelessly, with their default frictionless settings, they were wildly insecure.
So this isn't a unique failure of OpenClaw. This is the standard rite of passage for any hyper-growth open-source technology.
Well,
First comes the explosive adoption, driven by ease of use, and then comes the painful reckoning when enterprises realize they actually have to lock down the perimeter.
precisely. The core architecture of the building is solid, but millions of organizations are buying the buildings, leaving the doors wide open, and forgetting to hire a security guard.
Which brings us to an incredible point of tension in the market. Businesses are staring at this landscape, and they are desperate. They desperately want the multi-model freedom to avoid vendor lock-in.
Yes, they do.
They want the 99.99% uptime. They want those incredible dreaming features synthesizing their corporate knowledge. They want OpenClaw. But they cannot, under any circumstances, accept the catastrophic liability of an exposed default configuration. They need the absolute freedom of owning the building, but they desperately need the landlord's professional security guards back.
Right.
And that demand creates a massive vacuum, a vacuum that is immediately filled by the corporate cavalry.
Enter NVIDIA.
Yes, NVIDIA steps into the arena with a solution called NemoClaw. They unveiled this at their massive GTC developer conference on March 16, 2026. If OpenClaw is the process of buying the building, NemoClaw is the act of hiring an elite, heavily armed, professional security firm to construct an impenetrable, monitored perimeter around the entire property.
It is a dedicated enterprise-grade security and governance layer designed specifically to wrap around your OpenClaw deployments.
Okay.
NVIDIA looked at the chaos of the market. They looked at the 138 CVEs, the 42,000 exposed instances, the ClawHub supply chain attacks, and they correctly identified that Fortune 500 enterprises will never adopt this technology at scale unless the security is solved at a systemic architectural level.
Because you can't trust people to do it manually.
You can't rely on individual developers remembering to configure firewalls. So, NVIDIA built a framework resting on 3 critical pillars of defense.
Let's unpack these technical defense layers carefully,
Yeah.
because I want to understand how they actually stop the bleeding rather than just taking NVIDIA's marketing brochures at face value. Pillar number one is the kernel-level sandbox. What is the mechanism here?
To understand the kernel-level sandbox, you have to understand where security normally sits. Usually, security software is just an application running alongside the agent.
Right.
If the agent gets compromised, the attacker can often just reach over and turn the security application off.
Just flip the switch.
Exactly. A kernel-level sandbox pushes the security protocols down into the deepest foundation of the server, the core operating system itself. And crucially, it operates on a strict deny-by-default posture.
So the exact inverse of OpenClaw's allow everything default.
The absolute inverse. Within the NemoClaw sandbox, every single action the AI agent attempts to initiate, whether it is opening a local text file, pinging an external web address, or querying an internal database, is physically blocked by the operating system, unless a human administrator has explicitly written a rule permitting that specific action.
Wow.
If an attacker manages to use a prompt injection to trick the agent into downloading a piece of malware, the kernel intercepts the command. It checks the approved list, sees that downloading executables is not permitted, and instantaneously kills the agent's process. The attack dies at the operating system level before it even begins.
It is an absolute zero-trust environment, like a bank teller who has to get dual authorization to even open their own cash drawer.
It's exactly like that.
Okay, pillar number two, the out-of-process policy engine. How does this differ from the sandbox we just talked about?
Think about the architecture of a submarine.
Okay, submarine.
If the front torpedo compartment suffers a catastrophic breach and floods, the crew seals the bulkhead doors. The flooded compartment is isolated, and the rest of the submarine survives.
Right.
In a standard software setup, the AI agent and the security rules governing the agent are running in the same compartment. If a bad actor breaches the agent, they are inside the room, and they can manipulate the rules. What NemoClaw achieves with the out-of-process policy engine is placing the security rules behind a sealed digital bulkhead.
So the AI agent is running its operations in process A, and the security guard monitoring those operations is running in process B, and the two never physically touch.
Exactly. Even if a highly sophisticated attacker completely compromises the agent running in process A, gaining total control of its logic, they have absolutely zero digital pathway to access process B. They cannot rewrite the security rules.
That's brilliant.
The policy engine maintains absolute, untouchable authority over the agent's behavior, regardless of how badly the agent itself gets corrupted. This mechanism leverages an open-source runtime NVIDIA developed called OpenShell.
OpenShell.
Yeah, it isolates every single agent into its own bespoke sandbox. Administrators use very simple, readable YAML configuration files to draw hard boundaries. They dictate exactly which network ports, which file directories, and which APIs a specific agent is allowed to perceive.
Which solves the compartmentalization problem beautifully. You can have a marketing agent that is explicitly authorized to interact with the Twitter API and the public website, but because of OpenShell, it is mathematically walled off from even knowing the payroll database exists.
Total compartmentalization stops lateral movement during an attack. If the marketing agent is compromised, the blast radius is confined exclusively to the marketing sandbox.
Which leads us to the third pillar. And looking at the enterprise landscape, I genuinely believe this is the most brilliant strategic unlock in the entire framework. The privacy router.
The privacy router directly addresses the ultimate data sovereignty dilemma paralyzing corporate boards today. Large businesses are desperate to leverage the immense reasoning capabilities of frontier cloud models like GPT-4 or Anthropic's Claude 3. But they are absolutely terrified of transmitting their highly proprietary regulated data to servers controlled by OpenAI or Google.
Right, because the liability is massive. If I'm the CIO of a hospital network, I absolutely cannot feed patient medical records into an open ChatGPT window to have an agent analyze clinical outcomes. It is a catastrophic IPA violation.
It's a non-starter.
But I still desperately need the analytical power of that agent. How does the privacy router navigate that contradiction?
It acts as an intelligent, dynamic traffic controller that analyzes the payload of every single task before it leaves the sandbox. Let's trace your healthcare example. The NemoClaw privacy router sits directly between your local HR agent and the external AI models.
Okay.
The agent receives a task requiring the processing of highly sensitive patient diagnostics. The router analyzes the data, instantly detects the presence of protected health information, and triggers a routing rule.
What does the rule do?
Instead of sending that task to the cloud, it routes the workload to a local Nematron model, a smaller, open-source model running physically on the hospital's own internal hardware.
So the sensitive data never touches the open internet.
Yeah.
It never leaves the physical building. The I-pay compliance is maintained.
Exactly. But the intelligence of the router doesn't stop there.
What else does it do?
10 minutes later, that same agent is asked to perform a complex but entirely non-sensitive task, for instance, drafting a generalized public relations press release about a new pediatric wing opening, utilizing vast amounts of public medical literature.
No private info in that.
Right. The privacy router analyzes the payload, confirms there is zero sensitive data present, and routes the request out to the cloud to utilize the superior reasoning capabilities of a frontier model like GPT-4.
Wow.
It seamlessly and invisibly stitches together the absolute privacy of local hardware with the boundless intelligence of cloud models, evaluating the risk dynamically on a task-by-task basis.
That is just phenomenal engineering. You achieve the ultimate best of both worlds without compromising security or capability. And clearly, the broader enterprise market recognizes the genius of this architecture, because the launch partners for NemoClaw represent a staggering consolidation of power.
Unprecedented.
NVIDIA announced over 150 massive founding partners at GTC. We are talking about the foundational pillars of enterprise tech. Salesforce, SAP, ServiceNow, CrowdStrike, Cisco, Google Cloud, they have all publicly committed to building NemoClaw native agent integrations within the next 12 months.
And that roster of partners is a massive, definitive vote of confidence. It signals to the entire industry that regardless of the current chaos, this specific architecture is the foundation the enterprise world is betting its future on.
But, and here's where we need to deliver a very cold splash of reality for the decision makers listening today.
Yeah, we do.
When you hear about 150 massive partners, and you hear about impenetrable kernel-level sandboxes, it sounds like a completed puzzle. It sounds like a CIO should hang up the phone, call their engineering director, and demand they deploy NemoClaw across the organization by Monday morning.
If we connect the enthusiasm of a tech conference announcement to the grinding reality of enterprise procurement, we have to provide a very sobering reality check here.
Lay it on us.
NemoClaw was announced with incredible fanfare, and the underlying architecture is brilliant, but it was launched as early-stage alpha software.
Alpha?
Yes, it is a proof of concept. It is not a hardened, finished product that you can simply plug into your network today and trust with your company's lifeblood.
So the keynote demo is not the production deployment.
Precisely. The PrentusAI research points to a very relevant study from MIT highlighting the friction of adoption. The study found that enterprise AI procurement averages 9 months from the initial pilot program to a finalized deployed contract.
9 months.
9 months of testing, security audits, compliance checks, and integration work. The promise of NemoClaw is incredible. It genuinely appears to be the secure bridge that will finally allow OpenClaw to cross into the Fortune 500 safely.
Why?
But real safe, battle-tested production deployments, they're still months, if not a year, away from being a reality. The architectural promise is there, but the operational proof is still compiling.
Which leaves the business owners listening to this in an incredibly precarious state of tension. You have OpenClaw, the fastest growing software in human history, pulling you toward it with irresistible features, immense efficiency gains, and the freedom of multi-model redundancy.
Very tempting.
But it is locked in this brutal battle between absolute operational control and absolute security vulnerability. And you have NVIDIA rushing to construct the secure bridge over the chasm, but the concrete on that bridge is quite literally still wet.
It is the most challenging moment for technology decision makers in a decade. You absolutely cannot afford the strategic misstep of ignoring OpenClaw and falling behind your competitors who are automating their workflows.
Right.
But simultaneously, you cannot afford the existential risk of deploying it recklessly and exposing your entire corporate infrastructure to the open internet. For anyone trying to thread this needle right now, I cannot recommend the source material for today's dive highly enough.
Yes, absolutely.
Go to PrentusAI.com. They have meticulously detailed, plain English guides on exactly how to navigate this gap. Specifically, you should read NemoClaw Security, the Enterprise Guide, and their forensic breakdown of the OpenClaw security incidents.
Yeah, and their YouTube channel is an absolute goldmine. They have some fantastic video explainers that visually map out exactly how these kernel sandboxes and privacy routers function. If you are a visual learner trying to wrap your head around out-of-process policy engines, those videos make the abstract concepts incredibly tangible.
Highly recommend them.
And navigating this tension leads us perfectly into the final phase of our journey. Part 3 of this Agents at Work series drops later this week. You are going to want to make sure you are subscribed because we are moving away from the underlying technology and stepping into the harsh reality of the courtroom and the balance sheet.
It is where the theoretical capabilities collide with legal and financial realities.
Exactly what we need to cover. We are going to break down the ultimate decision framework. We'll be looking extensively at the EU AI Act deadline, which is looming ominously just 4 months away and carries the threat of massive revenue percentage fines for noncompliance.
That's going to be a huge deal.
It is. We are also going to tear down the true hidden cost comparisons of renting the managed walled garden versus owning the open source building. And we will outline the immediate, practical day one steps you need to take to prepare your organization. But before we sign off today, I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over. A thought that builds on everything we've discussed. Let's hear it. We talked earlier about that mind-bending feature in OpenClaw called dreaming. The reality that your AI agents are sitting there during their idle hours, quietly consolidating your company's proprietary data, your private personnel notes, your internal financial spreadsheets, and forming active compounding memories.
Yeah.
They are systematically developing a deep subconscious understanding of how your business operates.
A capability that is immensely powerful, but requires profound trust in the environment where that processing occurs.
Exactly. Think about the uncomfortable security reality we just unpacked. If that intimate dreaming process is occurring on a server that hasn't been completely locked down by a framework like NemoClaw, well, if the front doors to your digital building are sitting wide open to the internet and a third of the tools you downloaded might be poisoned, who else might be quietly tapping in to analyze the subconscious of your company?
It's a chilling thought.
As you weigh the strategic choice between renting the pristine office from Anthropic or taking ownership of the building with OpenClaw, ask yourself this fundamental question. Where exactly do your company's digital memories live, and who ultimately holds the keys to the room where they are kept?
That is a defining question every leader must answer before deploying a single agent.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We can't wait to see you back here for part 3. Until then, keep learning and stay curious.